So welcome everybody, and it's good to see, as I mentioned briefly before we just started to go live, nice to see a lot of new faces, and we've got some interesting subject matter to cover off. I'm pretty excited because we've got a lot of deals going on. So with a lot of our community, when for those of you that are new, when I refer to community, those are individuals that use our program, and we have consulting emails and calls going back and forth, and we've got a lot of deals going on. So that's always really, really exciting, especially, seeing the change time of year. It used to be that the world of buying and selling businesses would start to decline in the spring for some reason, but haven't seen any let up. So that's great. For any of the newcomers, we do these every couple of weeks and try to do this as a building module with different subject matters. So try to go back and look at some of the prior webinars. They're all posted on YouTube, and in the invitation that you see throughout online, there's links to that within YouTube. In the video and playlist area, you can click and view all of them. They're all a couple of hours long, typically comprising of about an hour and 15 minutes of education, and then open Q&A. Just again, for all the newcomers, the reason why I started doing these webinars is predominantly Search Funder and some other websites where I started seeing just a whole ton of misinformation related to buying businesses. And it becomes very, very disturbing to me because it's bad information, inaccurate information, or way too generic information, and a whole lot of misleading information of individuals. I'll give them be very respectful and call them individuals, because I might be inclined to call them con men and con women, but I'm not going to do that. Who are selling these programs for thousands and tens of thousands of dollars with just ridiculous promises of being able to buy businesses for no money down. I had one recently, a text to buy a $250,000 cash flowing business for no money down and close the deal in 19 days. Well, I mean, if you could do that, I'll walk outside and eat my car. I mean, it's just impossible. So those things really make my blood boil, because I've devoted my professional life to buying and selling businesses for myself and to helping people like you acquire good businesses. So it just really, there's some great advantages of social media, but there's some terrible downside to it as well, where you could sort of just throw out these ridiculous delusions and lies and really bothersome to me. The one thing I do want to tell everyone who's new to this is not an infomercial for the materials that we sell. This is informational, it's educational. If you ultimately decide to follow our program, I think you'll come to that your own decision that it makes sense for you. But this is not an infomercial or a hard pitch to sell our program. This is educational in nature, and whether or not you decide to follow our program, we're thrilled to have you, and you're always welcome here. So a little bit about me, and I'm sorry to look down. There's just a couple of housekeeping items I want to make sure I cover off. So I've been buying and selling businesses for myself for 34 years. I've acquired 14 companies and price ranges from $50,000 to $208 million. So I've got a full gamut of businesses that I've acquired. And when I say to you that I've been in your shoes, I've been in and I am in your shoes every single day. This is what I do for a living. I sometimes feel like this is an AA meeting and I say, hi, I'm Richard Parker. I am a business buyer. That's what I do. Okay. And I love helping people get to the finish line in these deals, because I know how challenging it could be on the one hand, but on the other hand, I don't come from a fancy education. I grew up in a blue collar area. I never went to university. I went to 2 years of the Canadian equivalent of community college. I've been living in Florida for 28 years. I started buying my first business with $30,000, which is today's equivalent to about $75,000. So this is 100% doable. It's doable by anybody. The distinguishing factor is if you have the desire, hope, and dream to buy a business, that's wonderful, but that doesn't get you anywhere. What gets you places is the need to buy a business. You don't want to buy a business. You have to have a need to buy a business. And you need to do that to either replace or generate an income, or you need to put yourself in a position where you have no limit to your upside, or you need to put yourself in a position where you can build a business, grow the value, and eventually exit. So this is entirely two components, which is aptitude and attitude. The attitude we just talked about, the aptitude is the knowledge, because this is by and large new to everybody. And so having the right knowledge from the right people is critically important, and it alludes back to what I talked about earlier. Make sure you get your information from the right people. There's lots of noise on the internet. There's lots of generic information, lots of garbage information and inaccurate. So make sure you get your information from the right people. When we talk about some of the data points, I've been dealing with business buyers related specifically either representing them or the materials that we produce since 2001, and we have tens of thousands of successful clients. And I've spoken with just a ridiculous amount of prospective business buyers like you over the years, and certainly in the tens of thousands. And so when I give you data points, these are data points that are based on really significant numbers. And it's very important for you to understand, because a lot of this plays into how you're going to approach the process of buying a business. So I want you to keep these in mind. And some of this is repetitive for those of you who've attended prior educational sessions. So I apologize for that. But one of the key points is over 90% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction. That number is actually close to 94%. And there's good reason why, and I agree that the stats are abysmal, but there's a good reason why, and we're going to talk about a little bit about those. And the average individual takes 18 months, spends 18 months looking to buy a business, and still they never buy one. So this can become a monumental waste of time. I call it the SWOT theory. For those of you with business school degrees, you'll know the SWOT theory, SWOT, for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I call it the SWOT formula for a staggering waste of time, because that's what happens to most business buyers. And my agenda, my mission, and your goal is to buy a business in 6 months. 82% of our clients do it. It's absolutely doable when you go along the right path, follow the right blueprint. Is it possible that it could take you 8? Potentially, but it should never take you more than that. And the formula we use is 4-4-4-1-1. 4 months looking, 4 categories of businesses, 4 offers, then 1 month of negotiation and 1 month of due diligence. The last 2 points, the 1 month of negotiation and due diligence, could potentially turn into 2. So could become 8 months. But that first 4-4-4 is unbreakable. And that's the falling off point for everybody. When you go past that 4 months, if you haven't put in 4 offers, you're on your way to becoming another statistic. That's what the data proves. So if you've been looking for longer than 4 months, and certainly in the 6-month range, and you haven't bought a business, you got to adjust your thinking. And that's a part of what we're going to get accomplished today. 75% of the businesses listed on business for sale websites do not sell. And business brokers only sell 10% of all businesses that are sold in America. And so while the databases of businesses for sale are a great place to start and a great place to conduct some of your research and looking at different business types, understand that if you don't go beyond that, if you limit yourself to those, you're limiting yourself to a sample size of 4 businesses that won't sell and don't represent 90% of the market. Okay, so those are really important. And the other stat, which I find pretty crazy, is 50% of small business deals fall apart in due diligence. And that's typically a lack of misrepresentation related to the seller's financial information. But those are very important statistics. So what you want to be able to do is if 90% fail, obviously, you got to start doing what 10% of the people do. You don't want to go down the road of everybody else, because most people do the exact same thing and they all wind up smacking their face into a brick wall at the end. They don't buy a business. We talked about the fact if you've been at this for more than 4 months, if you go back and look at one of the first webinars, I believe it's called The Right Business and Increasing Deal Flow. I think that's the title of it. It's on YouTube. That'll take you through in great granularity the formula and methodology of that equation. As far as getting the most out of today, a few things. Number one, you've got to be open-minded. If you've never done this before, come into today with a I know nothing attitude. There's a lot of information that's going to be new to you, but treat yourself and your brain as a blank slate. We want to begin at the beginning, starting today. There's 15 million people that look for businesses in the course of a year in the United States in a lower market. So there's a lot of competition. You have to separate yourself from the crowd. There's a limited number of businesses for sale, regardless of how you get to them, whether they be publicly listed or private solicitations that you get. There's a lot of buyers, so you've got to separate yourself from the crowd. Just a couple other points. The strategies that I'm going to talk about, they're simple, blunt, effective. We talk about a building block, and I try to break everything down into bite-sized pieces. That's how all of our learning is done. Our program, for example, is 23 steps in the buying process. Each lesson, if you will, mirrors that. Buying a business is not difficult. It's complicated. So we reduce that to bite-sized pieces, and that's the way you want to attack it. I deal in the real world. I don't give any BS about buying businesses for no money down, cash flowing at $500,000 a year, and you can close a deal in 20 days. I had a text from someone recently, one of these programs, close a deal in 19 days. Not going to happen. I believe in buying rock solid, good businesses, not distressed businesses. The goal is you want to buy a good business where you get the keys on Monday and you can take a paycheck on Friday. You don't want to buy a distressed business, because what happens in that case is you get the keys on Monday and you're gonna write a check on Friday to fund the business and make payroll. So we talk about buying rock solid, good businesses that you can make great, that fit well with your skill set. Buying comes down to a couple of things, and we talked about need versus want and knowledge. And so that's what we're going to impart today. We have this learning component, and then we open it up for Q&A. I invite you, please, if there's anything that you want to ask me that may be confidential, that you don't want to ask in front of everybody who's here, feel free to email me. I'll put my contact information on at the end, and you can email me at any time with any questions, and I'm happy to answer whatever it may be. There's a lot of things that I don't know, and I like to think that I'm a reasonably humble guy, but when it comes to buying and selling businesses, I know my stuff, because I've been doing this for 34 years and I've been doing it successfully. I have a few horrible acquisitions that I've made in my lifetime. There's no question, but they've been good learning experiences. But I've been really, really blessed and very, very grateful, because it's been an unbelievable journey. And I'm having the time of my life right now, because we're educating a ton of people and seeing a lot of people get to the finish line. And it's really, really exciting. As a matter of fact, next week, I'm filming a Zoom call with an individual in Canada who's an immigrant from Uganda, who came in, had no money, nothing, no expertise. He took a bus to go see his first business, and emailed me a few weeks ago that he completed the transaction and he's looking to acquire another one. And the story is like chilling. And so I'm going to interview him next Wednesday or Thursday. His name is Dixon Kawigsa, and it's a great story. So those are the things that really turn my crank. Today we're going to talk about questions the seller is going to ask you, and that's a follow-up to what we had last webinar of the key questions you need to ask the seller, talking about the seller's mindset. We're going to have a Q&A session. We have future sessions coming up on due diligence, which we're going to break down in a bunch of modules, valuations and financing the deal. And we're going to also increase the number of educational sessions for our clients who follow the Good Business, How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price program, so that they can get some little more airtime together. So with all that and my signature introduction, as they say in Massachusetts, let's get the party started. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. If at any point you're having any trouble seeing anything, just do the raise your hand thing. So preparing for the seller questions, some questions may come from the broker before you even talk to the seller. So understand your preparation is fundamental, because it may not come from the seller itself. You don't want to get ambushed. If you prepare, you'll be fine. If you don't, you won't progress. And one of the things that's really important, if you don't have any funding and you don't have any business ownership experience, it's critical that you impress the seller that you are the one they want to buy their business, because you're starting from a position of weakness. You're not starting from a position of strength. Someone who comes in, who has the money, who has the background, is ahead of you, but they don't have to remain ahead of you if you go about this in the right way. I mentioned earlier to go back and revisit the course and prior webinars about how to impress the seller, because this is something you absolutely must get right. Because if they're not impressed, number one, they won't finance you. Number two, they won't believe you can get to the finish line. And number three, they won't have confidence in you preserving their legacy if that is important to them. It's not for every seller, but certainly if it is important to them, and you do not impress them, they do not believe that you will be able to preserve the legacy that is important to them. The good thing is, if they are impressed, you can change the deal dynamic 180 degrees. If they like you, they see your sincerity, willingness to learn, and your burning desire for entrepreneurship, they will likely work harder with you than anyone else to try to find a way to sell you the business. And I have seen this happen repeatedly. And again, it comes down to being able to impress the seller, not with nonsense, as we'll talk about in a minute, but there's a path and a formula to be able to do that as your relationship with the seller evolves. And you must always, always, always answer their questions with complete transparency, never any BS, be humble. Remember your past discussions regarding formal education. Remember, you must ask your seller questions first. We talked about this earlier. If you're meeting a seller whose business is on the market, publicly listed for sale, and you sit down to ask them questions, you must always ask your questions first. And the reason why is if you let them ask you the questions, they are going to ask you certain things like your background, your expertise, your history, operational experience, etc. And if you give them an answer that says, I've been in the logistics business for 14 years, my focus is specifically on improving processes, procedures, and systems, and building teams and working with them. If you give them that answer, when the time comes for you to ask them who is the ideal candidate to buy this business, they are going to say to you, it's someone who's got logistical experience, who's got operational experience, who's used to building teams and putting a plan together to grow a business. They will mirror what you have told them because they want to sell you the business. So if the beginning, you must ask your questions first. If you get into your background, if they ask you, you've just got to provide some surface information, because if not, their answers on most questions will be tailored to you. Because remember, they're called a seller for a reason. They want to sell you the business. So keep that in mind. When we talked about off-market deals, obviously you're going to let the potential seller ask you their questions first. We talked about that earlier because you really want to get to know them and not hiding. This is a cold solicitation that you've given them. So certainly you want to be completely open with them and say, to ask you any questions. But on the businesses that are on the market, you must ask your questions first. Tell me about your background. What is your area of expertise? Just be prepared with these answers. Why are you interested in buying my business? And here you must have positives only. You don't want to say anything along the lines of, my brief review of the business, I see there's some terrific opportunities to grow this business and add some functionality or sales teams or marketing, what have you, because what you are doing is you are taking a shot at their business. Even if they agree with you and they know it should be done, it's a backhanded insult and people get defensive. So you want to be able to it's nothing but positives, because the overarching theme is I want to be able to buy a good, solid business that I can learn and eventually grow. So again, the answers are only positives. If they tell you or share any negatives with you, that's fine. You can act upon those, but you do not put those forth. Okay. Are you planning any changes to the business? The only answer is no. Nothing. And again, I don't buy distressed businesses. I talk about good businesses. The answer is no. And the reason why that puts up a red flag, they're worried about employees, they're worried about suppliers, they're worried about customers. The answer is no, because that is going to reinforce to this seller that nothing is going to get, there won't be any upheaval. The other part why the reason is no is because you know nothing about their business. You don't have a great understanding. You don't have the guts of the business in your belly. You've got to go through a learning curve as well. So the true answer is no. It's no. You want to convey that to the seller, and it's no from your standpoint and your approach, because you can't change anything until you're immersed in the business and understand. Why should I consider selling you my business? Now, this is where the preparation is key to understand what's important to them, whether it's value, whether it's legacy, whether it's the staff. What they're asking you with this question is, how can you, as a buyer, meet my expectations as a seller? And so when this question is asked, your preparation, some of the earlier questions that you're talking to them about, you're going to be able to extract some of that information to identify, as we talked about in previous webinars, their hot buttons, what's important to them along the way, because they want to make sure there's a meeting. Whatever it is that they expect and what's most important to them is they want to make sure you can meet that. Now, it's not all unicorns and pixie dust as far as legacy and all this wonderful stuff. There's plenty of sellers. They just want to sell you the business, get the best price and terms possible, and that's the end of the story. But similarly, you need to understand that. What is your time frame for buying? Your answer, yesterday. And we've talked about that previously. Even when you submit inquiries on some of the business for sale websites or to business brokers or what have you, sometimes there's a checkbox. What is your time frame for buying? One to 3 months, 3 to 6, not sure, 12 and more, etc. Your answer always is yesterday, because sellers want to deal with someone who's got a sense of urgency. And rest assured, if there's a broker involved in the deal, and you're sitting in a meeting with a broker, and the seller or broker asks you, "What's your time frame for buying?" and you say to them, "Sometime within the next year," that meeting will wrap up quickly, and you'll never hear from them again. That I could guarantee you. They may ask you if you have partners that will be involved in the decision or operations, and if you do have any partners that will be involved in the operations, you have to bring them to the meetings. And you not only have to bring them to the meetings, you need a little bit of rehearsal, meaning determine between the two of you who's asking what questions and make sure you don't interrupt each other. I've been there on the other side of the table representing a seller where two individuals come in, seem like nice, smart individuals, and they start asking questions, and each one starts talking over the other one. And you look at this and say, and I was representing the seller, and I look at this and say, these guys can't even get along now. Like, imagine what's going to happen when they buy the business, and my client's going to give them a note, and these guys can't even seem to get along. So make sure you do your pre-planning, your rehearsal, as far as who's covering what subject matter, and don't talk over each other. Okay, now, Sia, we can get to the no questions, the no answers. So these are questions where your answers very often will be no, and here's how you have to answer that question. Do you have financing in place? Obvious question that you're going to be asked. If you don't, this is your number one priority. First of all, for those of you that are here that are based in the United States, I know we have a number of people from outside the country, Canada and Europe and Middle East today. For those that are based in the United States, you must go get SBA pre-approval immediately. And you may decide to go down another road, but you need to determine whether or not you are going to get SBA pre-approval. If you do, at least you'll be able to present that, yes, I've been pre-approved through SBA. Now, the business may not pass or what have you. That's fine, but at least you provide that. If you can't get SBA pre-approval, you've got to investigate your lender resources, make sure you're aligned with your prospective lenders for what you're looking for criteria in business. And as we've covered previously, I apologize for that. As we've covered previously in this, if you have some potential investors, you're going to have the dilemma of, well, how can I go find investors if I don't have a business? What I'm saying to you is, how can you find a business if you don't have investors? And so you have to start lining that up. And for those individuals that you speak to, that you do have in mind that you can potentially take a deal to at the appropriate time, you need for them to provide you with a benign proof of funds letter. And that letter, they have no exposure, but it's going to be a letter along the lines of, on their letterhead, and this letter is regarding George Edwards. George, since you knew we're going to use you an example. This letter is regarding George Edwards. We have agreed that under certain conditions, should George present us with a business opportunity that meets our criteria, we are prepared to finance his acquisition up to X amount. It's benign. They have no obligation. They're not on the hook, but you need to have that available, because as soon as you demonstrate that you cannot finance the deal, you're out. You're done. You're cooked. And so get this into place. This is similar to the answer of your timeline to buy. Get this into place immediately when we get off this webinar today. Start working on that if you don't already have that in place. For those of you that are funded searchers, that's a different situation. Do you have adequate capital if you need to fund the future, and what's your plan? And here, it's very much talking about making sure that you have adequate capital. And this is where people run into a whole lot of trouble when they buy distressed businesses and think they're doing themselves a favor by buying a business that, first of all, it's a garbage business. So I don't know why anybody would want to buy distressed business. But if you have to put some money back into the business, at some point you have to be make sure that that's available to you. And certain lenders will obviously provide you with working capital, etc. But it's a question that's going to be asked. Other typical question, how much income are you planning to take out of the business yourself? And your answer is verbatim, enough to live on. I want to use the profits to grow the business. The seller is not asking you this question to determine what your standard of living is. They're asking you this question to make sure if they're going to potentially provide a note to the business, you're not hauling out all of the money for your lifestyle, and there's not going to be enough money left at certain times to pay their note. So that's understand that this is the rationale behind their questions and the reasoning for the answers that you must provide. Another question, will you be bringing in some of your own people? And this is a biggie. And your answer is as follows. That defeats the reason for buying an existing business. I sure hope I don't have to do that. Now, the reason why you want this as your answer is you don't want to say, oh yeah, there's absolutely no way I'm bringing in my own people, because what if you determine that you want to? And what if you say to them, well, yes, I am bringing in my own people. And they're going to say to you, well, who? And you can say, oh, I'm going to bring in a finance person. And they're going to say, well, what about Mary? She takes care of, handles all of the accounting functions. She's our CFO. Are you getting rid of Mary? And now you're in a hole and you start digging. So these are the way you want to answer them. When something is presented to you guys on this webinar that would give you a specific way to answer this question, you don't add a comma. You answer the question exactly as it's listed here because it's worked repeatedly, and when it hasn't worked and when it hasn't been done, it causes problems. So it's critically important to follow this exactly. And these are really part and parcel of understanding the preparations that you're going to have going into these meetings and how important it is to think about in advance what you're going to be asked, right? That's really important, to not just go in like a bull in a china shop with your questions and not thinking that there's going to be other ones coming. You've got to have your questions, know what answers to look for, and follow up with those questions and what questions the seller is going to ask you and your preparation for them. But if you get a little stymied, there's nothing to worry about, because it's understanding conceptually how you're approaching this, which is no changes. I'm here to learn. I want to buy a good business. I'm not a know-it-all. I want to ask my questions. I'm not making any big changes, and I'm being completely 100% transparent and honest and no BS, and you never get yourself into trouble. These are no answers where you need to have a workaround. When I say no answers, questions were typically buyers. The answer is no, so we need to come up with a workaround. And 3 are typically, have you ever owned a business? Have you ever operated a business? And do you have experience managing people? And if the answer is no to one or all of those, here's how you overcome them. Number 1, whatever relevant experience, what is the relevant experience that you do have? And you want to be realistic. If you had a summer job stacking boxes, it doesn't make you a logistics expert. So you certainly don't want to do that. Okay, so realistic experience of what you've done. And sometimes you don't have any, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's being transparent and honest, because if you impress the seller, and honesty and transparency and sincerity go an enormous way to impress people versus your pedigree and your education. So if you impress the seller, you can get by all of this. They're not looking for, yes, it would be great if you have direct experience in that particular business, but if you don't, you tell them you don't. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, because this is establishing a relationship with the seller. You're going to move down the road together. And the less experience, the less money, the less background, the less track record you have, the more and more that relationship has to be developed, nurtured, and evolved, because that is potentially what's going to get the deal done for you. You want to line up some mentors and advisors yesterday that you can talk about and bring in to the business when you don't have any operational experience, and be able to convey that. You want to build a personal relationship with the seller. We've talked about this in every session how important that is. So again, please go back and watch some of the other webinars so you understand the core of this, because it's so important. Demonstrating good character will show the seller their employees will like you. Now, it may take some time for them to gain confidence in you, and not all sellers will accept it, but that's fine. Just understand this is a process. This doesn't happen overnight. You can't convince someone to love you in one meeting. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. And make sure you ask a lot of well thought out questions. You do your research, but well thought out questions always impress people. And we've talked about on an earlier webinar related to the seller that you're going to deal with, and the seller that you're typically going to be dealing with are guys like me, old farts like me. That's the silver tsunami. I don't have as much silver hair, but that's the silver tsunami. And they're guys like me. And so they want to just see nice, kind, thoughtful people and engaging and have a good conversation, as opposed to coming in with somebody and telling them all the things that are wrong with their business. So let's talk about the seller's mindset for a little bit. Understand their life may be turned upside down. Their identity will be gone. Most don't think about what life will look like post-sale. When I do my intermediary work and represent sellers, and I still handle a few transactions a year, the single question that I ask people right out of the gate is the only one I harp on when I go, because I interview prospective clients, because I'm not even sure I want to take on their engagement, is do you know what you're going to be doing after you sell the business? Because if they don't have a handle on that, a lot of times remorse is going to settle in. And we're going to talk about that shortly. So understand that this is something that you deal with. They are losing part of themselves. Oftentimes, you might come across business owners that own the business for 30 years. So part of themselves is disappearing. That plagues people and plays in someone's mind. And they may be facing their mortality for the first time. They think back and say, oh my goodness, I started this business. I was 34 years old. Now I'm 64. It's like some of these things start to set in. So the mindset, when we talk about attitude and aptitude and attitude for the buyer and having, persevering and having hopes and desire and a need to buy a business, that's all wonderful for the buyer side. But keep in mind, the seller's got all these emotions going on as well. And so above everything else, empathy always wins. And so being empathetic and understanding the situation, there will be times that they're going to say things, do things, or demand things that you're going to want to tear your hair out. That's okay. Just be empathetic, because they are going through an equal amount of emotion as you are, and probably more so. So here's some common mindsets and traits. Interestingly enough, they're very consistent depending on the type of way that they've come to market with the business. And I've seen this repeatedly, where certain businesses and how they're marketed dictate the mindset of the seller. So you really have 4 types of sellers. You have publicly listed businesses for sale. And those sellers are individuals who mostly they do want to sell. They have a certain level of motivation. They've done a little bit or a certain amount of preparation, but they're in the game. And for the most part, they're ready to sell. Doesn't mean they will sell, but they've come to grips for the most part that they're going to be selling their business. Okay, so you have that group of individuals. Then you have the off-market deals that you found by direct solicitation, meaning you sent out, used a template in a course, you got a bunch of responses, and now you're carrying on conversation with those individuals. They were solicited and they're off market. Well, they're the ones that are intrigued, right? They've talked about it probably with an advisor, and they're interested and they want to pursue the dialogue. They may or may not be motivated, but they certainly have a level of intrigue. Then you have the off market by referrals. For example, your accountant says, hey, I have a client. She owns a distribution business, and she's getting prepared to sell, and you may want to talk to her. Well, that's a warm introduction. That's really terrific, very helpful. We could start that conversation and get off to a pretty darn good start, because the warm introduction helps you get past that first date stage. And then you have individuals that are FISBOs. They brought the business to market themselves. And have any of you, even by lifting up your hands, come across any of these? Okay, great. FISBOs are nuts. okay? The mere fact that they would undertake something of this magnitude and bring it to market themselves, it's almost across the board a know-it-all attitude. They don't think they need attorneys. They don't think they need accountants. They don't think they need an intermediary or a business broker. And they also have not taken into account how many conversations they're going to have for buyers and how much time they're going to take away from their business. And so they have no clue how to navigate this process. It's a dangerous animal, if you will, to deal with. And so you have to understand the mindset of someone who brings their business to market themselves. This is not like putting your house on the market without a broker. This is a lot busier. They know nothing about the process, how to prepare. They don't even know what NDA to sign, what they should ask the buyer, what this information they should dispense. So when you're dealing with a FSBO, understand that, and this is not even like on the whole or by and large, this is like 99% of the FSBOs that you're going to deal with are unprepared. They have no clue what they're doing. And it's a very, very difficult mindset to deal with. So be prepared. And so I'm not sure what everybody's experience is. I've dealt with, I don't know, maybe 100 of them over the years. And it's like, again, 99 of them have just, it's a little wacko. The whole thought process to even get to that. If you do not understand the seller's true motivation, concerns, and their hot buttons, you can miss out on a deal that you could have easily gotten done. That's how important this is. Because when you get down to those hot buttons and concerns, and you could hone in on a deal structure around that, you can get to the finish line. And if you don't, you end up missing an opportunity. So what are their concerns? It's either legacy, it's taking care of employees, or how much money they're going to walk away with. That's typically their concerns. And what is their motivation? Do they want to sell? Do they need to sell? Would they like to sell? Or they're just seeing what's out there? And so someone who's just seeing what's out there, obviously, you have to just walk along much slower with them and pace yourself through this process, because they're just putting their toes in the water, versus someone who's highly motivated or someone who needs to sell. And someone who needs to sell for a whole host of reasons, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And here's the questions. Here's the question that I always ask the seller is, what happens if you don't sell the business? The seller who says to you, oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, if I don't sell the business, I don't sell the business. I'm going to carry on like we did before, and all will be okay. Well, there's a diminished level of motivation versus someone who says to you, no, I have to sell the business. I have to sell the business because of X, Y, and Z, because of retirement, because of illness, because of divorce, because of whatever the case may be, but they have to sell the business. That will in turn trigger what leverage you may or may not have relative to the deal terms. I gotta stop for a second because someone doesn't have their mute on and I hear a lot of background noise. So if you don't have your mute on, please kindly put it on. Thank you. And the morbid or the morbid reasons that we talked about, which they're sad, death, divorce, illness, etc. And it is sad, and we want to be empathetic, but don't let that undo your leverage. They're going to sell it. If they have to sell it because of a morbid reason and it's a good business, they're going to sell it to you or they're going to sell it to someone else. So we all want to be empathetic, and you certainly do feel bad, but understand there is leverage there, and you're actually doing them a favor. If they have to sell it because of those reasons, you're doing a favor by being able to accelerate a deal with them. 2 ways to determine their deal terms and hot buttons. You don't know if it's price, terms, down payment, note, or other, and this is really important to know what that is. So if you ask them, what's most important to you? Is it price? Is it terms? Is it down payment? Is it note? Is it something else? If you ask them, they will tell you. But if you make them an offer, then you'll know the truth. Because that is how you determine their hot buttons. The only way. You make them an offer, they respond, you'll know what it is. That's their single most important hot button. And you can adjust yourself accordingly, because very often you satisfy the hot button and then you leverage all kinds of other deal terms. For example, if they say it's the amount of the note, well, if they want a short note, then you can negotiate potentially purchase price. I had one particular situation where one of their hot buttons was related to the value that they were going to get for their business, because they want the bragging rights to tell their peers that they sold their business for $1 million. I couldn't get past $900,000 valuation, no matter how many times I tried, and finally realized when I had a bunch of conversations and had the offer into them, and they kept coming back, and no matter how much I moved up incrementally, they were always above the $1 million. And it finally came to the surface that they would, it came to the surface that they wanted to be able to say they sold their business for $1 million. And I said to them, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $1.2 million for the business, but I want a 30-year note. And they agreed. Crazy. Because people sometimes they lose their mind when they get hung up on some of the hot buttons. We can talk about one of those conditions in a moment because it's prevalent. So when you're making offers, number one, you must get used to making offers. And there's no discussion here. I'm not going to give you a whole drop down of why you have to get used to making offers. If you want to be a business buyer, you got to get used to making offers. End of story. The first one is tough. Other than that, it's easy. You're typically going to write an LOI. It's non-binding unless there's language in there. That's to the opposite. You just follow the template that we have in our course and use that as your LOI. But the point being, you've got to get used to making offers. Remember that 4-4-4 part of the formula? If you don't make 4 offers, you're not winding up with one business. There's plenty of people that can make more offers. So if you don't make any, you're not going to be able to buy a business. So get used to it. The first offer you make is going to be the most difficult. And the way these LOIs are formatted, even definitive purchase agreements in some of the smaller deals where you bypass an LOI and you go right to a definitive purchase agreement, and especially follow that we have one in the course, the exact template to use it. You could drive a truck through it. So you don't have to worry. It ties back to number one, get used to making offers. And what does an offer do? It takes their temperature on price, terms, and contingencies. That's what it does. So if you want to find out what are their hot buttons, what are their concerns, what are their motivations, what are their expectations, an offer accomplishes all of those because they're going to respond. And then I had a question this week as part of our email consulting that someone sent me as far as making an offer, and they were worried about insulting the seller. Go ahead and insult them. If you've formulated a valuation that is defensible, that is thoughtful, that is based upon actual numbers and proper fundamentals attached to that and a multiple that makes sense. In other words, you have a defensible valuation. It's unfortunate if they get insulted, but it's no different from the fact that they have an asking price that's ridiculous and void of any logic. And that to me is insulting to the buyer. So obviously, if you determine that a business is worth $1 million and you as the valuation, and you start out by offering $400,000, well, shame on you. I mean, you're not going to get it. And so you again, the valuation has to be defensible. But if the seller happens to be insulted and you're able to demonstrate why your valuation is defensible, that's fine. You're good with that. That's fine. You go ahead and you make your offer. We talk about an LOI often or a definitive purchase agreement. Whenever possible, get as much detail and contingencies listed, regardless of the format. And the reason why you want to do that is you don't have to deal with all this other stuff afterwards. If there's any critical things, you want to put them into the LOI at the early stage, so you get the hard big pieces out of the way. And so you may be faced with having to make an offer without adequate information. And it happens times if you want to tie up the business or you need to get more detailed financials or other information. And so I say, if you have no choice, follow Nike and just do it. But one of the things that you'll have is, for example, if they won't release detailed financials and take you until you make an offer, well, this is if you want to proceed with it, we write an LOI, we make it bulletproof, you could drive a truck through it. And one of the contingencies is, I'm sure everybody's gotten this, is the first contingency is that the seller must provide the detailed financials within 3 business days after the LOI. So that solves your issue and it gets the LOI into place. And hopefully that's very clear to everyone. But the top of the pyramid to this particular slide is get used to making offers, because offers are the only way to elicit the seller's pain points, their hot buttons. And if you're going to go through this process effectively and wind up at the finish line, you're going to have to make several offers. There's just the numbers. It's just unavoidable. Now let's talk about why they are selling. You, the buyer, must figure out the real reason why they are selling. It can give you incredible insight and leverage, or reveal if the seller is full of you-know-what. That's how important this is. And you want to ask them, but then you want to validate it. And I've pulled out a bunch of things here, and this is actually directly from our course. The way we try to walk through the way we walk you through the process and the material is here's what you need to do. Here's what you know. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to do. Here's how to do it. And you ask a question. You don't just get satisfied for the answer. You ask a question. You have to have follow-up questions to make sure you validate, because what the seller tells you is important, but you got to validate. If you believe them, you listen to them, but you believe nothing. And so I'm going to go through some of these, and this is directly from the material, so you'll understand the context of how learning related to buying a business, how I look at it from my perspective. So if they tell you, well, I'm planning to retire, well, your follow-up question, it's very easy. They could say, well, I'm planning to retire. And you say to them, oh, well, congratulations, Bob. I'm very happy to hear that. That's nice. Well, that doesn't accomplish anything for you, the buyer, because there could be some consequences of their retirement to you in the business. So you ask them, what are you planning to do? Will you be staying in this area? Are you looking forward to it? Do you think you'll miss the business? Is there a time factor here? Very often people retire. They have a spouse who's retiring at a similar time. They may have bought a property somewhere else. I gave everybody the example where I was looking at a business, and I believe it was May or June, and they had bought a property. This is in Florida. They had bought property in the Carolinas, and their date was they wanted to be out by Labor Day. And the agreement with the business owner and his spouse was the second they get an offer, they're going to put their Florida house up for sale. And I knew once they do that, they are mentally sold. So put in an offer, saw their house go up. I ended up shaving 25% off. It was 25% off the purchase price, because then they had a sense of urgency, because I knew in their mind, they mentally already left. Already were gone. They wanted to be that part of the plan had been done. And the other part of it, which you have to think about because there is potentially a downside, was I had less time for training. And that's okay, because it was the type of business I was going to be able to manage. So the follow-up questions are critical. If they say it's illness, well, obviously, I hope everything has turned out okay. Has it prevented you from devoting full time to the business? And they say, yes, it has. Well, that's your cue to go back and look and say, have certain things not been done or fallen into disarray as a result of them not being able to pay attention full time to the business because of their unfortunate condition? How long has this been going on? Is there any chance you may want to rejoin the business later? Or without sounding too personal, does this situation entail any specific timing issues? And I know this is a little sensitive. Like, you don't want to be asking someone, if God forbid it's that sick, it's like, you're not asking when are you planning on popping off? It's not, I'm not trying to be that blunt about it, but understanding they could have treatment or a condition. And so you need to understand that. Is it boredom? You get a lot of these. What is specifically about the business that does not provide for you? Is it simply a matter that you've been doing this too long? Realistically, if the business is so good, why not get someone to run it and split the profits? That I always find this boredom answer pretty lame. It doesn't really add up. It happens, but it's one of those very lame reasons for selling. Sometimes they may tell you it's a new opportunity. Is it a similar business? If they say, well, it's along the same lines, well, then you may need to pay a whole lot more attention to the non-compete that you put into place. Can you do both, or can't you do both? You have to sell this one to begin the other. And if they say yes, or they're cagey about it, well, then you start to realize that they're going to need the money from this one to sell the other one. To buy the other one. And so in that case, the down payment may be infinitely more important than the seller note or the purchase price. So this is how this works, right? They're like levers, right? You pull one, another one comes up. This is the point of these questions, counter questions, point, counterpoint. Does that mean that the business can't grow to your expectations? If you believe in this business, why are you leaving for another opportunity? Sometimes maybe to cash out. Are you planning to start another venture? How flexible are you on the terms? And so they may be very flexible. There's sometimes a seller they want to extend the payment terms because there could be advantage to them from a tax perspective. Because you see this quite a bit in divorce. These situations can get really messy, and they're common. They're a real pain, because what happens is both sides bring in the artillery. They bring in their professional business appraisers. They bring in the attorneys and divorce attorneys, who, for anybody who's ever had the joy of going through a divorce, I can tell you that divorce attorneys love keeping the deals going. Transaction attorneys want to get the deal done. They want to get paid. Divorce attorneys want to keep people fighting for as long as possible, because that's how they get paid. And so if this business is being sold because of divorce, understand that you're dealing with the owner, their spouse, the owner's professional business appraisal that they may have to get done. Then it's going to be argued from a business appraiser from the spouse's side, the spouse's attorney, the spouse's accountant. They can get very messy. So certain questions, like very often the spouses may own the business together. So it's not even a question of divorce that they have to deal with the valuation of the business for how much the other party to the marriage should get as a result of the sale of the business. The spouses may in fact be partners in the business, and that adds a whole other layer of complexity and mud to all of this. So you want a certain question like, why don't you buy them out and keep the business? Do they have shares in the company? This is so important that you ask them. If they tell you divorce, you've got to find out whether or not their spouse has equity in the business. What percentage? And must they approve any deal they make? And you must get that in writing. They may say to you, "I know, don't worry about it. I own 100% of the business, but I'll take care of it after." Well, you need to get that in writing, that they are showed you previously how to find out who owns what percentage of shares in the business, or who are the managers, who are the members, but you want to get it in writing to make sure that nothing has changed that. And sometimes it's just it can be a very, very messy situation. So understand what you're dealing with, and then you add the layer of emotion to all of this. They sometimes could be very tough situations, and they're common in business sales. Relocation, if the answer, why can't you move the business? Obviously, in some cases it won't work, but it's an applicable question, especially today when so many people work remotely. And what are you going to do in your new city? So those are the ways that you ask the question about why they're selling. You understand the answers that they provide, and there's always these follow-up questions, and there's an agenda to the follow-up question. And the point being with all of this is the preparation and understanding. You hear what the seller has to say. You sort of believe nothing because you have to validate it, but knowing that you're not just taking answers at face value, because the follow-up questions, the thoughtful questions, and people are going to be impressed, even the seller, that you're asking these follow-up questions, because they provoke more questions. Questions beget more questions. They provide an answer to something else. So it's always this good back and forth. Is seller's remorse real and common? Just if anybody can, by raise your hands, I got a quick question to ask. If you think that seller's remorse happens in more than 50% of these transactions, raise your hand. Well, I can't see everybody, so I apologize because a lot of you have your cameras off. But for those of you that see, and most of you did raise your hand, it is a resounding yes. Seller's remorse happens as frequently or more so than buyer's remorse. Crazy, but it does. And so the way you look at this is deals are like fresh fish at the marketplace. The longer the fish stays on the shelf, the stinkier it gets. That's what happens to these deals. And sellers get remorse all the time. So when I say how often did this happen? All the time, in almost every deal. It's just the degree to which it happens that determines whether or not they are going to back out from the deal, have second thoughts, sabotage the deal because they can't get through with it. But there are some telltale signs. The luxury of doing this for 3+ decades, I've seen a lot of this. So how do you diagnose when remorse is creeping in? There's a couple of ways. The first and most common ways is their timing to provide you with information changes. When you typically have asked them for, can you give me last April's P&L, and it comes to you in 48 hours, and then another time you ask them, do you have the one from October, and it's 48 hours or sooner, and then you ask them, do you have the one from July, and all of a sudden a week goes by and you don't hear from them. Things like that. When their timing changes to provide you with information, it's starting to creep in. Responsiveness to questions. If let's say you've got into the habit of some email questions that you may be selling them or the broker, by the way, in most of these in these situations, and their responsiveness, they may be more vague, they may not answer, they may be taking longer. Certain times it could be the broker starts to hint. We've got to start getting moving on an offer here, because we're starting to get, I'm starting to get a little bit feedback from Bob And, I'm not sure if, if you're thinking this is the right situation, those type of things. So the broker may be giving you some feedback. Or the one I the one I love, because I've had it happen to me a few times, where the seller says to me, a friend of mine suggested that I should probably expand my network of buyers and see what else is out there. Or a friend of mine says to me, I probably am financing too much of this deal. Or a friend of mine says to me, have I gotten a professional appraisal on the business? It's one of those, okay? That's when remorse is starting to creep in. And it's pretty funny that I've had it happen a few times where they've said verbatim, a friend of mine or a colleague of mine. So these are things, when these happen, understand seller's remorse is creeping in. I'm going to tell you how to deal with it in a second. They may start asking you some odd questions, such as, when they look to sabotage a deal or thinking about rescinding the deal, they start asking you some of these odd questions, which is like, so do you think we're going to get the deal done? Or are you, the buyer, having second thoughts? They're having second thoughts, but they're trying to project this decision onto you. Do you have any concerns that you haven't told me about? Or is your family excited about you buying the business? Because typically, most family members are not going to be excited about you buying the business because they're going to be concerned. They don't want you to take risks. They don't want you to get hurt. They may be behind you 100%, and you've got to absolutely have them on board. If they're not on board, you shouldn't even be on this webinar, but they've got to be on board. But they are going to have their own concerns and apprehensions. So they start projecting these questions. So when you start seeing some of this, the answer, the thing that you have to be dealing with, you have to be aware of it, number one. Number two, there's only one solution to all of this, which is this. You have to sit them down and say to them, is everything good at your end? Are you 100% all in this transaction? Because if they start doing some of these things in a covert way, meantime, you're spending all your time, effort, money on accountants, money on attorneys, money, an opportunity lost from other deals, and they're having these second thoughts. You have got to deal with it face on. They may be cagey in the way they're going about doing it. You cannot be cagey at all. And so do not be afraid to put the hammer down and ask them. And here's why it's really important that you do this as well. I was born in Canada. I lived there for 35 years. Canadians, we don't sue anybody. I think there's a couple from Vancouver on here who meet, and some other people may from Canada. Canadians, we're not litigious by nature. You can become pretty litigious once you live in America for a little while, but what happens is, as long as you quantify this with them, if you come across the situation and you have said to them, and in writing or had this conversation with them, that there's no remorse, they're not changing your mind, none of this, and they decide to change their mind for no good reason whatsoever, if you spent $20,000 in accounting fees, you may have to go after them. I don't even like to broach this subject because I'm not litigious at all, but why should you bear the cost of them being anything but completely transparent with you? And so that is why, for that reason and the other reasons we've cited, is for the time that you've invested, you've got to face this head on, because it's if you look at enough deals and have enough, I guarantee you it's going to happen. It's just the degree to which it happens. So be aware of it and deal with it effectively and immediately. Next, we're going to talk about the bee in the bonnet syndrome. And my congratulations to my wonderful assistant, Darlene, who formats all our PowerPoint presentation and put the bee in there. So great job, Darlene. I know she listens to these afterwards, so I thought that was pretty cute. The bee in the bonnet syndrome. What is the bee in the bonnet syndrome? The bee in the bonnet syndrome is like, when the seller has a bee in their hat and it's driving them crazy, and it's a situation that comes up. It probably comes up in most deals, where the seller becomes irrational and illogical about an issue that defies anything that you could possibly get your head around. And something could be, for example, I've seen it as small as a seller putting the halt on the sale because the assets that were included in the deal included a painting that he had in his office was a business I was buying. It's another one of those disgusting paintings I've ever seen in my life. And he got all panic stricken about this idea that he had to include this painting. You know what? Here, take the painting. Right? I mean, who cares? We had a situation where the seller, it's something, again, and keep in mind, when someone's illogical or irrational, the two things that you can't do to combat that is logic and rationale, because they're off the reservation. So I'd one in a situation where the seller wanted to add in another $25,000 over and above what had already been agreed to the purchase price. And it was for a leasehold improvement that they made to install a kitchen in the place. Like, you think about how crazy this was, right? I mean, we're doing this significant deal, and when all is said and done, they start getting crazy about adding an extra $25,000 to the deal because of a leasehold improvement in the business. And I just couldn't figure this out. Like what is wrong? And like in that thinking. And when I got to the root cause, because you want to understand what is the rationale, and getting to the root cause or the root issue was, at some point in time, the employees had given him a lot of pressure to install a better kitchen for them. And I mean, it's not right, but he was totally against it and finally caved in and spent $25,000 on this kitchen. And it bothered him, he said, every single day, which is just nuts, but it bothered him every single day. And that was his rationale. Again, I said to you, when people are irrational, logical, you can't apply logic or reasoning to it. And that's why he wanted to get the $25,000 extra over and above the purchase. I said, but you're already getting it. Like, this is the purchase price. You're already getting is 25,000 over and above. So there's two ways I could have approached it. I could have told him, here, tear up the deal. This is ridiculous. You're being insane. Or just say, okay, here's your 25 grand. Like, it's not worth it. And very often in these cases, or you potentially leverage it. But understand, this is going to come up. If it's minor and not that big, don't fight it. Just forget about it. Or as they say in New York, just forget about it. Just get the deal done. It's not that consequential, and you can't debunk their theory. So just forget about it. So hopefully you've got some good insight after today so far about understanding the importance of preparation, the understanding of the questions you'll be asked. Get your answers into place immediately for those no questions that you're going to where you're going to respond no to, related to some of those items that we talked about. We're going to go to our question and answers in a minute. However, these pieces of the equation, and for those of you who follow our course, and for those of you that I consult with, and those who watch the webinars, you understand that I look at this from a very, very different philosophical approach related to buying a business and how much the relationship is, because I've seen it over and over again, how that generally is more important than the numbers piece, because numbers are numbers. That's the easiest part to deal with. But understanding all these little innuendos about the interaction and how you interact with the seller and what to look for. And when they say this, you ask that. And when they do that, you do this. And if they say something like this, this is what it really means. Understanding all of that. It's not a game. It's actually just a thought process that you need to understand, and how they're looking at the deal. And so these pieces today that we covered related to questions that they're going to ask you and their mindset, you could see the double clicks to all of these, how it can actually impact the terms of the deal and leverage that you can gain as a result of some of these things, whether it be the reason for that they're selling, that they have to leave town in a certain period of time, or there's a financial situation, or that the down payment is more important to them than the total price, or whether their legacy is more important than another piece of the deal. All of these dictate how you get deals done. And if you follow the right blueprint for this, the advantage always shifts to the buyer. And it should shift to the buyer, because in all these deals, irrespective of how much you mitigate your risk through deal terms and negotiation, the buyer assumes the greater part of the risk in these deals. And so keeping this in mind related to leverage is really, really important. And having that knowledge base, it makes the whole difference in the deal. And so hopefully today will be very, you find this helpful from understanding the mindset. And We're going to open it up to questions in a second. But first, I want to give you what I always tell in these webinars is I want to give you my unapologetic presentation for our materials. So I think most of you on the call anyways have our course, so that's great. And you know how much I appreciate it. We've had a lot of great consulting sessions with our clients. Just to let everybody know, we have this program. It's called How to Buy a Good Business at a Great Price. It's by far the best-selling program related to buying a business online. It's been around for 20 years. It's updated constantly, of course. But a big part of this of the program is we include unlimited free consulting with me. And that makes the whole difference to you. So you're able to establish your knowledge base. And I see Britton's back on the call. We've had a couple of calls, and I'm seeing everybody that we've had a bunch of calls with. That's really an incredible amount of luster, because one of the most important things is, as you go through this process, you got to deal with believable parties and make sure that you're getting answers from the right people and the right answers. I mean, it's very easy to find generic information. So we have this 548-page course that mirrors the process and the steps in the business mind process, from considerations you should make right through to post-purchase priorities and everything in between. And it's all broken down into modules and includes case studies, a 200-point due diligence checklist, evaluation software that we've used on previous webinars to show you it's automatic. You plug in the numbers and it pumps out a evaluation based on business fundamentals, all legal agreements, documents, etc. And if you're going to get to the finish line of this process, your knowledge base is critically important. These webinars are helpful, but these webinars you need to be using to augment your knowledge. This is a very different process. This is a very different project that you're embarking upon. So all these videos and webinars, which I'm very proud of, and I think they've got some great helpful tips. If you go to some of our YouTube channels, that's you're augmenting the information. You need to have a blueprint. You need to follow a blueprint that gets you through the process. And that's the only way you're going to get there. And so, my agenda for preparing that material is, I talked about it before, and if you've seen some of the podcasts, I've been on like 70 podcasts in the last 5 months alone. Tell people I'm in the business to help people, and I get a great buzz out of it. And I find it really gratifying, and try to make it affordable. If you decide you don't want to follow the material, that's fine. You're always welcome here. We always love to have you on the webinars. We're going to have to start cutting down some of the number of participants, or adding some webinars strictly for our clients, but you're always welcome here. But one thing, you got to do me a favor. Just, if you're going to buy material later, don't buy any of this nonsense that people are selling you for thousands and tens of thousands of dollars about delusional things. You're better off light your money on fire. I'd love to welcome you to our community and hope you take advantage of it and go to richardparker.com. Please do that anyways. I mean, there's hundreds of articles related to buying a business that are there, hundreds of articles, and some free reports. So lots of information. If you go to the section on the top where it says courses, you could buy the course. The whole thing is $197 and includes unlimited consulting. So personally, I think you have to be out of your mind not to buy it. And we give you a lifetime money back guarantee, because the money doesn't matter to me. If I sell a course or never sell another one, my standard of living doesn't change. I really enjoy this process, and I hope you'll join our community. I think you'll find it very, very helpful. And I'm sure anybody who's on this call that's already following our material, I could say with full confidence, will tell you with absolute conviction how helpful it is going to be. So without further ado, let's thank you guys. I appreciate the thumbs up. Without further ado, we can open up the Q&A. Anything and everything you want to ask is available. No problem. Go ahead. We've got lots of time. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if there's anything that you want to ask about that's confidential, or you're concerned, just email me. We can avoid it if you're worried about breaching any confidentiality. So see you there on Saturday. It's the Kentucky Derby, and they're going to say one of my favorite days of the year. And even though I'm not a gambler, I love watching that whole day of events. They're going to say, and they're off. So take the mutes off or whatever, and anybody throw up your hands. I know Britton's got a question, and anything that I need to do, Sia, or we're good to go?
Let's go ahead and go with Britton first, and then we'll, if you guys can, because there were some questions in the chat section. So Britton, go ahead and go first.
Just a question around, I feel like the seller, that can be hot or cold, but the relationship seems to be continually tainted by the broker, kind of putting his nose into things. And I'm just wondering, how do you, if you do get a good relationship going with the seller, how do you continue to kind of keep the broker out of play and not hindering anything? And have you seen anything like that yourself, where things have gotten rocky just because the broker keeps over speaking or just kind of impacting the relationship with the seller negatively?
Well, I haven't seen it every day, but I've seen it every second day. It's very common. It is really common. And so there's a couple of ways to address this. If you have a ongoing relationship with the seller, you first of all, you never want to circumvent the buyer or the broker under any circumstances whatsoever, because they could ruin the whole deal. But you can let it be known to the seller. I prefer to have a meeting of the minds first with the broker to tell them, look, I have a nice relationship with the seller. We're carrying this conversation. They're not going to sell this business without you. You're not getting screwed for your commission. You have nothing to worry about. I'm not sure why you're sticking your nose into this deal, but I just want to be very front. I want to have this conversation with you because right now you're going to cause this deal to go off the rails. And so I'm going to be very frank, and I know you're smiling because it's not a hard conversation to have, Britton, because you know what? They're screwing up your deal. And so the first thing I would do is have the conversation with the broker and tell them this is where
that's very blunt. That's
it's much. Yeah, I know, and it may not be easy for you to have. And so if you're, I prefer bluntness. I'm not rude. I'm personally blunt because I'm getting too old. I don't have much runway left, so I got to talk fast and I got to get things settled quickly. If you're not comfortable with that type of conversation, have a more delicate conversation with them along the lines of the following: look, Mr. or Mrs. Broker, this is all new to me. Okay, I'm learning the process as we go. However, there's a couple things that have come up that, irrespective of my lack of experience, just seem odd to me. And so I need your help on this. And first, I want to convey to you, let me be very clear. I want to buy this business. And I will buy this business. But there's a couple things that come up, and then I would go into, for example, and say, so I need you to help me help you get this deal done. And so I would do it more gently if you're more comfortable with that, unless you hire me and I'll straighten them out in 5 seconds. Okay.
Not to say, yeah, I'll just
joking.
bring you on
I'm
for
just
that.
joking. But so what you want to do is, again, the most important thing is you want to be is to have the conversation with the broker, not the seller. Because if you tell the seller, the broker's really being a pain, the broker could turn around and they may be buddies, and they could say to you, I don't want this guy buying my business who goes around the broker's back and talks to me. Right. So you go speak to the broker in any way you're comfortable, and don't be afraid to surface it, but make it be very clear. I want to buy this business. I just find that sometimes, like, there's things coming up, it seems to be more of an impediment, and I'm assuming you want to sell it. So that's the way I would approach it. If that does not work, after a couple of other instances, you'll let me know, and we'll go to plan B.
No, it's really helpful. I think that's really helpful. Sometimes the brokers seem very untouchable, but you're right. It's like they want the deal to go through, and
more than you. They don't eat.
The
deal doesn't go through. They don't eat. Jamia.
Hey, how you doing? Mr. Parker?
I'm doing great. My name is Richard, not Mr. Parker.
Sorry, Richard.
All good.
Quick question. In dealing with sellers of, say, needs-based services, such as lawn care, HVAC, AC, and looking to buy those businesses, in your experience, how often have you seen the ability to do more leveraged buyouts in those industries, and like service-based businesses or needs-based businesses?
It's a great question. The leverage used to be much greater than it is now. And the reason why in those particular businesses, and the reason why, is HVAC, home services, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, what have you, have come into the sights of the roll-up world and PE world. And whenever that happens, multiples get pushed up. There's usually not a very good outcome, because usually they end up overpaying, but the terms and conditions get skewed, and because of the big players that come into the market. And we're seeing that right now in a lot of home service businesses. And so your leverage more than likely has declined a little bit, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of leverage. It's just, relatively speaking, it has diminished, but there still is good leverage there, because these are predominantly owner-operated businesses with not a whole lot of recurring or reoccurring revenue, and there's a difference between the two. And so there's fundamentals to the business that just don't they just don't lend themselves to not having a lot of leverage, but the leverage has dropped. Make no mistake. On the smaller end, on businesses that are throwing off less than $500,000 of adjusted earnings, that leverage hasn't changed much. It's still pretty significant because most of these roll-ups are above that number. When I say roll-ups, when they buy a big HVAC company, then they may want to add on, they add on some smaller ones. But 500,000 of adjusted earnings is usually that cutoff line. And so that or below, the leverage has still remained pretty significant. Also, you have to pay attention to the licensing in those businesses to make sure that they can transfer, or how quickly you can obtain them, or whether or not you're able to trade off the owner's license, because that could really change the dynamic of the deal.
Okay, yeah, it make a lot of sense. So you're saying like if it's more or more so you're seeing those type of businesses that's less than 500,000 of like EBITDA, their multiple may be 1 or 2 versus now because of the PE world, anything above, because that's the area I was starting to look at above 500,000. They're trading multiples of like 3 to 5.
I just a hand I put up. They're trading up at 5 times. Some of them are trading higher. The ones that, so you should be able to be in the 3-time number. Typically, if it's a good, solid business, good reputation, depending on the level, they'll probably trade around the 3 times, and most home services. But when you get above that, they're like jumping to 5 and higher. We had a roofing company nearby recently sold 17 times, which personally, I think you should be committed if you pay that for a business, because you're never going to recoup it unless you're an institutional buyer and you're going to start adding on all kinds of businesses to it, but it usually doesn't end well. But yes, Jamia, your assumption is 100% correct related to that multiple number and where the increase is. Correct.
Okay, perfect. And real quick, what in the services business, I like to I'm just getting started with acquisition, and I'm glad I found you before I paid thousands of dollars. So thank you for what you're doing. But I'm looking at service and needs-based businesses only because I'm not going to use the term recession-proof, because people need them, whether it's recession or not. What other businesses besides home services, you get 1 or 2 that you see where it's still some, it haven't went too crazy in the PE world, and still some stability in?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that lend themselves, there's no such thing as a recession-proof business. There's recession-resistant businesses, but some of them that I've seen that seem to. The other thing, by the way, and I'll answer that question in detail in a second. The other thing, just to let everybody else know, when you're looking at and evaluating some of the businesses, and you want to be concerned about, how the different economic conditions impact the business, you want to test that with how these businesses came out of recessions in the past. So we've had significant recessionary times in 2008, 2009, 1999, year 2000, and even going back into 1987. The business that you look at may not even been in business that long. So if you're worried about how it came out of the recession, how it performed immediately thereafter or during the recession, go look at another business in the same type of business, a different one that's been in business for 10, 20 years. So you could take a look at their books and records to see how they came through a recession. Now, so hopefully that makes sense to everybody, because you want to stress test different types of economic climates. Now, Jemiah, the one area that I've seen that seems to perform very, very well, and it may not be for everybody, is certainly related to commercial. You have the home services, but you have the flip side, which you have related to business services. And business services that could be related to commercial cleaning. It could be anything related to the building envelope, window washing, anything. When I say the building envelope, it's what envelops a commercial building. So it could be window washing, could be lighting, it could be parking lot cleaning, those type of things. We see those as we've always seen those as pretty stable in tough times.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
All right, next is Jacob. He's been very patient.
He's always patient. He's even more patient now because he got a haircut since the last time we saw you.
I do what I can. I mean, I know I got to come on here. You're live streaming. I got to look good, right? So
you look like a movie star.
Well, I appreciate that. Coming from you, it means a lot. But I mostly have 2 questions that so I'm looking at is the one we called about. You called me the other day when I was on the road. It's a home accessibilities business. I don't have full financials yet. I only have the revenue for the past 3 years. You're looking at an average revenue of 1.34 million. And they want to include real estate in the transaction at 1.8 million. To further add a little bit of complexity, she doesn't want to close on the business till the beginning of next year.
Yeah.
I want to take money before then, right? So have you ever worked with I guess a management agreement in place, right? It's where the business hasn't officially closed, but I'm still, you go see where I'm going, as well as, what other options for structuring real estate in a transaction.
So there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing is related to closing later on. There's a couple of ways to do this. You could do this through a management agreement where you take over and you're operating the business and she's actually paying you during that time. That's number one. Number two, you can close the deal in escrow, meaning the deal gets closed, but it only takes, so documents are signed, everything is done, but it only takes effect on January 1st, 2025. Now, the thing that you have to be concerned about there is a couple things. Number one, you're not going to be able to get an SBA deal that way. That's number one. Number two, you have to have a provision that if there's material changes to the business between the day you close in escrow and the day you take it over in January 1st, 2025, it could change everything. And so you need to have that. You guys are going to all laugh now. I'm a Canadian, so you need to have that out. And everyone's going to tell me it sounds like I'm saying oot. You need to have that out to be able to walk away from that deal, even though you closed it in escrow, on May 1st, you're not taking possession to January 1st, because if they've changed the dynamics of the business or the business declined demonstrably, you have the right to renegotiate or rescind the offer. And sometimes you may have to put in if the business declines more than X%. So, but I can walk you through that and help you with some provisions. Now, related to the real estate, a couple of things. First of all, you got to make sure that they're charging themselves market rate for the rent on their P&Ls, because very often if they don't, so that adjusts your profits downward, right? And so if they want, because what happens is you're going to now, if they're not paying themselves market rate for the rent or enough rent to cover what the mortgage would be, they have an inflated earnings, and that has to be adjusted downwards. And now you also have, if you buy the real estate, you have to pay the insurance, the taxes, and the maintenance. So you might have a whole series of additional costs that have to be factored in. And on a business, my guess is that a business that's generating $1.3 million in revenue, if it's normal margins and what have you, and they want to sell the real estate for $1.8 million, you probably can't take a penny out of that business. If you're going to buy the real estate, all your profit's going to go to servicing the business, servicing the real estate. The math may not make sense.
Right.
And the other point that I'll make to you is you always, when everybody's faced with buying a business that has real estate involved, you must value the real estate completely separate and apart. You never mix it in with the business. Now, you may mix it in as it relates to financing, but the valuation are separate and apart. That should never be subject. That's not subjective. That you get professional appraiser, and you're going to get a valuation that's pretty close, but always do them separate and apart. Okay. Sia, I know there's some chat questions, so why don't you read those out? I think there's a bunch of those. Unless anybody else. Thomas, we're going to speak at 4:00 today, so if that's good for you. You want to, if there's anything you want to go through something quickly, and as opposed to, please go ahead. Sorry. Let Thomas ask his question, and Todd also. I just saw their two hands. Sorry.
Oh, Tomas, I think just pulled off.
No, he just.
No, I was saying Todd's there before me. He's been patient.
Okay. Go ahead, Thomas. We're fine. Or Todd, whoever.
All right, I'll start. So, hey, Richard, I was wondering if you could kind of give me some advice on whether or not that we should consider companies that are franchised. I've looked at some, and if the numbers look good, is there like some guidance that you would have in considering this, or do you typically just completely stay away from them because there's so much involved with those FDDs? And
I love franchises for the right people. So if you're talking about a business that is a franchise, are you talking about buying the franchisor or buying the franchisee?
Franchisee.
Okay. So the first thing is you want to make sure, I love franchises for the right people. So the first thing you have to make sure is that they make sense with your skill set, meaning the first litmus test is when you buy an existing business or you buy a franchise, there's two elements, there's support and there's control. If you're someone who prefers support and doesn't mind giving up control, a franchise could be right for you. If you're someone who likes control and can give up the support, then you don't want to buy a franchise because it's the support and the lack of control that's inherent with a franchise. So that's really important. The thing is, if you find the business is interesting, meets your skill set, I would absolutely go through the equation because the nice thing about franchises, first of all, I've never liked buying a new one. I always want to buy a resale because then you marry the best of a franchise world and an existing business. But the beauty is you can do your due diligence fast. And by that, I mean, if it's a reasonable banner, go out and speak to 20 franchisees. And you'll find out really quick if the franchise is any good, if the franchisor has lived up to their promises, and if the people, one of the things, and we have section number 9 in the course is all about franchises and gives you a whole due diligence list because you have to do your due diligence on the franchisee and the franchisor. So I would say my suggestion to you is I like them for the right people. I would go through the equation because or pursue the deal at least at this point, because I think it'll give you some real good insight into whether or not you could determine that a franchise itself makes sense for you. Because if it doesn't from that support and control standpoint, then no franchise is going to make sense for you. But if it does and you're good with that, then you open up some avenues to other prospective deals of franchisees. The other thing that I think is very important to keep in mind is what are the expectations and how to make money in franchising. You can't make money in franchising buying 2 locations. You have to have multiple locations and you have to have the ability to acquire multiple locations. So if growth is very important to you, and it may not be, but if growth is important to you, then you want to make sure that you're aligning with a franchise where you have the opportunity to buy multiple territories and multiple units, or may not be units per se, but multiple territories. And so you may have to take a little bit of a flyer to get a what they call a master franchise, but franchisors would typically want to sell new franchises to existing operators because you've proved yourself. And so I would definitely go through with the exercise. If any part of you believes that franchise makes sense, I would absolutely go through with the exercise, but understand how you have to go through it because you want to rule out or rule in franchises altogether.
Right.
But I do like them. I do like them for the right people. I think they're great.
Okay, that's helpful. I was one of my concerns about the franchise, being a franchisee, is that, if they change the rules during the game, and all of a sudden things don't look so good for you, profitability goes down because there's new requirements or what have you. So that was why I was a little bit shying away, but I wasn't sure if I should just totally exclude them or because I don't have a problem following a plan. I mean, they've got a successful plan, obviously, in place if they've been around for 20 years or more.
Yes.
So, okay, so that's helpful. And I just had one other follow-up.
Sure, please.
And that's, do you look at a certain profit margin, and is it by industry? So I've been typically looking at around the 20%, over the last 3 years. Is that something that do you have a number in mind, or does it go by industry, or it really depends?
Well, there certainly is. It's a great question. There certainly are parameters within certain industries of what are and are not acceptable profit margins or expense ratios. Certain things as simple as, the restaurant business. I mean, 2/3 should be spent on, food costs, occupancy and payroll. Most industries, most have some general parameters. Clearly, if you're in a business that's very comparable and they're way out either way, then you want to pay attention to that. I personally focus on margin percentage. What is the gross margin? That I get into a business, my golden rules, so shared with you, and from the course, it's sales and marketing driven. It has an element of exclusivity, demand in place, doesn't compete on price, and has high margins. And so for those 5 golden rules, I know if I focus on the sales and marketing, the margins are strong, the revenues, that the profits will follow. I'm less concerned about the revenues. So I focus more on margins. However, what I would suggest you do, if you're looking at an industry that it's pretty common, industrials or whatever it may be, that in other words, there's lots of competition, may not spot on. I think the website BizMiner, BIZ miner.com. I think it's BizMiner. We used to mention in the materials as well. They do a pretty good job of getting ratios by industry, and there's some of that you can get online. But I would not get locked into saying, for example, I'm only going to buy a business that has 20% profit margins. When I say profit, 20% bottom line to revenue, because, well, it sounds great, but what if that number is 100 grand and you could never build it to 200? Like you're better off to have a business that has lower margins that you can explode and grow to 500,000. So, there's two parts to the equation. So I think it gives us some general parameters, but I wouldn't get too locked into it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I've been walking away from anything that was kind of below that 20%. And one of the reasons is because, if some key person leaves or something happens within the business, where all of a sudden you lose a lot of this business, and I just want to have enough profit, I guess.
Right. Well, your assumption is correct, but it's not related to the profit margin. There's a bigger problem there potentially with customer concentration or a key employee. And so that, to me, that goes higher on the pyramid than the profit margin. That's a deeper concern.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
Of course. Tomas.
Richard, I'm getting ready right after this. I meet with somebody that I made an offer to. We talked about it. It was too high. And it's kind of like, I'm looking for my breakup language so that if he does come back down to earth, that they.
You want to break up with them? Tell them it's not you, it's me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
No, so I think if you have to, first of all, I admire, because the nice thing is you always want to do this in the right way. And if anybody, for everyone who's on this webinar, if you get to the point that the deal's not going to work out for you, we talked about this previously, don't just ghost the broker, don't just not talk to the seller, whatever you decide, just tell them, be upfront, treat them the same way you want to be treated, and let them know you've decided not to go through the deal for whatever reason it must be. If you've decided that you just can't get together related to the gap that exists between what they want and what you're prepared to provide, I think you try to end it on a really good way. There's someone on this call right now who shall remain nameless, who an offer that they put in on a business a few weeks ago, interestingly enough, the seller has contacted them because let's get together for a coffee type of thing. So this stuff comes back around very often. And so what I would do is tell them in a very nice, thoughtful way, for whatever reason, saying, look, we're just not going to be able to come to agreement on this and this. I really like you. I really like the business. If anything changes or you want to revisit this, you know where to get hold of me. I'm always happy to revisit this. And I was hoping that we'd be able to get this deal done. I just don't think we can. And it's not a negotiating tactic, but my door remains open. If something changes, please get back in touch with me. That's the way I would handle it.
Great. Thanks.
Of course. Okay, Sia, you're in charge now. I saw you were frowning at me. I was doing everything wrong, telling who to ask questions. Okay, I'll just shut up and answer them. Go ahead.
All right, Scott Phillips, I don't know if you're still on or not. Did you want to jump on real quick?
Scott Phillips is there. He's got a nice logo, but he's on mute.
It looks like he's still on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
How are you? So my question is, I'm pre-approved for an SBA loan. Already went through with Live Oak and got all that going. Been doing this for about 6 months in this search, and getting ready for an LOI. And my wife decided I don't think she thought I was that serious about it. So she didn't want the primary residence as part of a personal guarantee, which, I still have 7-figure net worth, with retirement and cash in the bank and stuff like that. So does that make a SBA loan kind of out of the question?
Hey, Deb Curtis, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, I sure will. Yes, the house equity, if it's 25% or greater, absolutely does have to be pledged if there is a collateral shortfall on the SBA loan presented to the lender. No ifs, ands, or buts. However, check with Live Oak, Scott, check with Live Oak if they would be willing to consider moving some of your cash liquidity into a certificate of deposit and take that as a lien in regards to the collateral shortfall. I can't say, you know, live oak what their policies are, but that may be an option to make the missus happy, to make the boss happy. How about that?
Right,
Right,
yeah,
right,
the
right.
ultimate boss, the real boss.
So
Deb,
the
would
other
you be
way
able to
was-
open a HELOC?
Yeah,
Would you be
yeah.
able to open a HELOC
Yes.
to lock up that?
Could do that too. So I guess kind of what I was thinking is, do I work backwards from with the everything, take the house out of everything, whatever's left over, whatever assets are
Yeah.
left over. Do I work backwards and then try to find a business that I can fund within that? Maybe it's $1 million, million and a
Yeah.
half. Do I do it? Is that reasonable? I mean, that's going to put me into probably to a smaller SDE,
Right.
500
Well,
investment.
there's a couple of ways, my knee-jerk reaction to it, and I think someone mentioned, I thought I heard, my knee-jerk reaction, and Deb, by the way, is like the Her Royal Highness as it relates to SBA lending, so you should get in touch with her.
She's the duper.
She's the best. And so
The
one of the
duper.
things that I would suggest.
No, you're not the duper. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not the dupe. Oh, yeah, you listen to us.
She doesn't
So one
do
of the
either.
things is,
I'm the
HELOCs have a way around it potentially. And it's usually what I've recommended, and I tell people to do that before they even start their sincere search to buy a business. Get it in place, and so you could always leverage that. You don't want to use it, but if you use it, take the money, at least keep it in your bank account so you don't spend it. But you put yourself beyond that 25% threshold, and that's really important. The other point what Deb was mentioning, I've seen that work before, where lenders allow you to put up money in a CD as your collateral and forego the real estate. I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea. So I would definitely go
okay.
that way.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And by
Just
the
a
way,
quick
Scott was
follow-up.
asking about saying something about who's the duper, because Deb and I do a show.
Yeah.
We do it every week up until recently, and now we're doing it every couple of weeks. But we do this crazy session called Who's the Duper, which is like the Reddit version of Am I the blank? Okay. So anyways, that's where we are. And I think George has his hand raised, and
Just,
Sia, you
yeah.
have some other ones.
Like a quick follow-up on that one, like do any buyers place their house in a trust so that they no longer own it but are,
Yes, they do.
beneficiaries, and then therefore the SBA lender will not place a lien on the house?
Yes. Yep. See it all the time. Deb, thumbs up. Agreed.
Is there anything I'd heard recently that banks will look back, and if you've done that within the last 6 months, that could cause an issue?
They
So-
can.
okay.
Some banks will do a look back, others don't. It case by case.
Interesting.
By case. Who's up next, Miss Sia?
May is next.
Go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. So it's funny because the last webinar I had a question, and this is kind of a follow-up of events. So I was asking whether there was a way to prevent a seller from going to market because he was considering it. A friend told him he should go to market. In any case, I didn't hear back from the seller for a couple weeks, and then he got back to me finally. He said, sorry for the delay. I thought really hard about it because I really enjoyed our conversation, but I've decided to go to market. And so at this point, I'm thinking now it's too late, because I was really hoping to just get in front of that and maybe meet with him in person and try to curb the whole thing. But now that he's made that decision, I wondered if you think there's any way still to salvage the deal. Like, are there any possible proof points or?
Okay, so it's a great question. We actually did too bad you didn't join us last week, because it's exactly what we talked about. The danger when you have a direct solicitation, if you don't Sherpa the deal effectively, and I don't know what you did or didn't do, and I'm not certainly making any accusations either way, but if you don't Sherpa the deal at the beginning properly, because the seller has no clue what they're talking about, the buyer typically doesn't know either, but if you don't guide that deal and act as a Sherpa, the first thing they do is they call their attorney after, say, hey, I met with someone, I think it's selling the deal, selling the business. And they say, well, you should speak to a friend of mine, the broker, an investment banker, etc. And then the broker calls you and the broker says, whoa, don't carry with it. Before you do any of that, let's package up the deal. We'll market it. We'll bring it to market. We'll create an auction. Why do you want to, paint yourself in the corner? So it happens frequently. And when you don't, the buyer has to take control and demonstrate that they can help lead the seller along the way. As far as how you can prevent it, go meet with them again.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, what he was saying is he really thinks he'd be leaving something on the table by
He
not
doesn't
taking
know
it to
that.
market.
Well,
I know he doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't know. So you can sit on the sidelines, and if their mind is made up, they're going to do it anyways, and you're not going to undo it. I mean, you could theoretically say to them, "Well, have you gone through and understood what the valuation is? Like, what are you expecting for this business?" And if they say they have a number, say, "Well, if I can come up with that number, will you not put it on the market?"
Yeah.
And then say,
Okay.
if that's the case, give me, you've already waited, give me 15 days, and I'll tell you if I can meet that price.
Okay.
But sometimes if their mind is made up, and that's the danger when, again, I like to use the term the Sherpa at the beginning, when you have these, there's such golden opportunities and they're easily lost and they're hard. And once they start to speak to people outside of you, it's usually gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
And some of them you just can't stop. So I certainly would give it one last shot without question.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Go
good.
ahead,
Okay.
Sia.
Thank you so much.
Of
I
course,
do
and
have
nice to see you.
another quick question, if that's okay. It's also related to a seller who has told me their asking price. And he said that he already got an offer from a PE firm, which he declined. And this is in the commercial services space. I think it's a good business, but is that a red flag if they've already declined an offer that no?
Do you know what the offer is?
I don't know the exact. Probably could find out though.
Yeah, I would ask them and say, well, I could look at your financials, tell me what the offer you declined, and I'll tell you if I think I can come in higher.
Yeah, so you don't think it's a red flag that it's unrealistic if a PE firm couldn't meet what he was looking for?
Depends if the PE firm was buying it as a platform company or as an add-on. They'll overpay for a platform company, and then they try to buy add-ons less, meaning the following. They buy a platform company and they pay 6 times earnings because that's the basis of their business, the platform. Then they're going to buy smaller companies to add on, and they're going to want to pay 3 to 4 times because they want to benefit from accretion, meaning they bought it at 3 to 4 times, roll it in, and it's immediately worth 6 to 7 times as the multiple. So if they were looking to buy it as an add-on, they may have given them a low ball offer or for whatever reason. I mean, part of the fact that the PE firm did offer something is kind of interesting, if it's even true.
Yeah. He told me which PE firm even.
Okay, so yeah, it could be true. I would say to him, look, well, if you let me look at the numbers, and tell me what you were offered, I could tell you if I can come in higher. If not, to me, with this whole process, and hopefully for you, those of you that are new on the call, I just believe, again, I don't like to waste time. So with all these things, what you're inclined to think that you should do, just be straight up front and say, and you can tell them, I think I can get you, I think I can come in higher than that, or no, or you should have sold it, or goodbye and good luck to you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
See ya.
I've been spamming everyone all the links. So everyone, please, if you want to have questions or got questions, you can either email, DM, subscribe, and like to the various YouTube channels I posted. Like, if you want to find out who the dupa is, by all means, please, please, please. Any support is appreciated for Richard.
So guys, I think we're okay. Perfect. 1 hour and 47 minutes. And thank you, Sia. And hope you guys found this very helpful and very informative. I had some things here with the next session. If you want to go, the articles that I was referring to about are on richardparker.com. So you should go take a look at those. There's lots of articles, free reports. We'll post about the next webinar. We are going to do for our clients for follow it. We'll send you stuff separately because we're going to be doing a few more webinars for that community individually. We will, coming up on next sessions, we talked about valuations and financing the deal. One of the questions that did come up is we did have some inquiries related to whether or not we should do some a webinar time in the evening. So, like at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time or on a weekend, if it would be more available. So we may mess around with that to see what becomes more popular. And of course, if you have any questions, email me. I look forward to seeing everybody in the next couple of weeks. And in between now and then, if there's anything on the consulting side, you'll have the link in the program. So you can get in touch with me directly to put yourself in the queue for a priority for consulting questions. And I look forward to those. And I think by next webinar, we'll have a couple more deals closed. Ciao for now, as they say. Thank you, everybody.